I always thought our little house at the edge of town was the safest place in the world. It was quiet, surrounded by woods, and far away from the chaos of the city. That night, I learned how wrong I was. It began at 12:14 a.m. I know because the glowing red numbers on the clock by my bed burned the time into my mind like a brand. I had just drifted off to sleep when a sharp noise jolted me awake. It was faint, but unmistakable metal against metal, like someone jiggling the handle of a locked door. My heart began to race. Maybe it was the wind. Or an animal. That's what I told myself. I sat up, straining my ears to catch another sound. My house was silent, too silent. The kind of silence that made every creak of the floor or rustle of leaves outside feel amplified. I reached for my phone on the nightstand, its cool surface grounding me slightly. I turned it on and saw no notifications. No one had called or texted. The faint noise didn't return, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. I stood up, my feet cold against the wooden floor, and grabbed the baseball bat I kept leaning against the wall. It was more for comfort than protection. I'd never imagined needing to use it. The weight of it felt foreign in my hands as I crept out of the bedroom. The hallway was dark, the faint light from the moon slipping through the windows. I moved slowly, stepping carefully to avoid the spots that creaked. The house seemed normal, but that didn't ease my nerves. When I reached the front door, I stopped. The lock was in place, but the doorknob looked off. Scratched. Like someone had been messing with it. My stomach tightened, and I tightened my grip on the bat. That's when I heard it, a slow, deliberate creak from the back of the house. Someone was inside. Every instinct screamed for me to run, to get out of the house, but my feet felt rooted to the floor. I couldn't think, couldn't breathe. My mind was a storm of fear and panic. The sound came again, closer this time. Whoever it was, they were moving slowly, deliberately, as if they were taking their time. I forced myself to move, stepping backward toward the kitchen. It was the only place in the house with a second door. If I could get there, I could slip out into the backyard and run to my neighbor's place. The kitchen was darker than the rest of the house, the heavy curtains blocking the moonlight. I felt my way to the back door, but when my fingers brushed the lock, I froze. It was already unlocked. A chill ran down my spine. I hadn't forgotten to lock it. I was sure of that. Someone had come in through this door, and they were still inside. I turned around, every muscle in my body tense. The house was so still, I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. I held the bat in front of me, gripping it so tightly my hands ached. A shadow moved in the hallway. It was quick, barely more than a flicker, but it was enough to make me gasp. My pulse skyrocketed as I backed up against the counter, the edge digging into my spine. I could hear the blood rushing in my ears, and I felt like I was about to faint. "Who's there?" I called, my voice trembling. "I have a weapon." Silence. And then, from the hallway, a low, raspy whisper. "You shouldn't have come out." The voice was so quiet, so unnatural, that it sent a wave of cold terror through me. I couldn't tell if it was a man or a woman. It didn't sound entirely human. I didn't respond. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely keep hold of the bat. I glanced at the door, considering making a run for it, but I didn't trust my legs to carry me. If I fell, I'd be defenseless. A sudden movement snapped my attention back to the hallway. A figure stepped into view. They were tall and thin, dressed in dark clothing that blended with the shadows. Their face was obscured by a hood, but their posture was unnervingly rigid, unnatural, like a puppet on strings. They didn't speak again. They just stood there, staring at me, their head tilting slightly to the side. The silence between us stretched, thick and suffocating. I didn't wait. I swung the bat with everything I had, the whoosh of air cutting through the quiet. But the figure moved impossibly fast, sidestepping the swing with ease. Before I could react, they lunged at me, their hand closing around the bat and yanking it from my grip. I stumbled backward, hitting the floor hard. Pain shot through my elbows and back, but I barely noticed. The figure loomed over me, holding the bat in one hand. They didn't raise it to strike, though. Instead, they crouched down, their face just inches from mine. In the faint light, I saw their eyes cold, empty, and staring right into me. "You shouldn't be here," they whispered again, their voice softer now, almost gentle. I scrambled backward, kicking at them with my feet. They didn't follow. They just stood up and turned, walking slowly back toward the hallway. I didn't understand. Why weren't they attacking me? What did they want? My mind was spinning, but I knew I couldn't stay there. I pushed myself up and bolted for the door, throwing it open and sprinting into the backyard. The cold night air hit me like a slap, but I didn't stop. I ran across the yard, my bare feet slipping on the wet grass, and vaulted over the low fence into my neighbor's property. Their lights were on. Relief flooded me as I pounded on their door, shouting for help. After what felt like an eternity, the door opened, and my neighbor, Mr. Johnson, appeared, his face etched with concern. "What's going on?" he asked, his voice groggy. "There's someone in my house," I gasped, struggling to catch my breath. "Someone broke in." He didn't hesitate. "Come inside. I'll call the police." I followed him into the house, my legs shaking so badly I could barely stand. As he called 911, I kept glancing out the window, half expecting to see the figure standing there in the shadows. The police arrived within minutes. They searched my house thoroughly, but they didn't find anyone. No signs of forced entry, no footprints, no evidence that anyone had been there at all. When they asked me to describe the intruder, I realized I didn't have much to tell them. I couldn't see their faces, couldn't even say for sure if they were a man or a woman. The police didn't say it outright, but I could tell they didn't believe me. I stayed at Mr. Johnson's that night, too scared to go back to my house. As I lay on the couch in his living room, staring at the ceiling, I replayed the events over and over in my mind. Nothing made sense. The figure's words, their behavior didn't fit the actions of a typical burglar. And then, just as I was finally starting to drift off to sleep, I heard it again. The sound of metal against metal. But this time, it wasn't coming from my house. It was coming from the room I was in. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. Slowly, I turned my head toward the window. The curtains were drawn, but I could see the faint outline of a figure standing on the other side, their head tilted to the side, just like before. "You shouldn't have come out." The whisper echoed in my mind, though the room was silent. When Mr. Johnson came in the next morning, he found the couch empty. The police later found me wandering in the woods, dazed and mumbling about shadows and whispers. I never went back to that house. And to this day, I still don't know if what I saw was real or if my mind had finally broken under the weight of fear. All I know is that the memory of those cold, empty eyes will haunt me forever. The crash of glass jolted me awake. My heart leaped into my throat. Rain lashed against the windows, blurring the already fading light. I strained my ears, every muscle tense. Had I imagined it? The storm raged outside, wind howling like a banshee. Then, another sound. A sickening crunch, like glass shattering beneath heavy boots. Panic surged through me. I grabbed my phone, my fingers trembling. No missed calls. No texts. I opened the security app, the spinning wheel of the loading screen mocking my fear. Finally, the cameras loaded. The front door was clear. The backyard, just swaying trees and rain. But the side window, the kitchen window, it was shattered. A figure was stepping through the jagged opening. My phone slipped from my grasp, clattering to the floor. My pulse hammered in my ears. Who was this? What did they want? I fumbled for my phone, the power flickering out. The room plunged into darkness, the sudden silence deafening. Only the storm raged on. My phone screen cast a weak glow, a beacon in the suffocating darkness. I dimmed it, pressing myself against the couch, my breath catching in my throat. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate, approaching from the kitchen. The clinking of glass under their boots sent shivers down my spine. I held my breath, praying they wouldn't come this way. I considered running, but the thought of facing the storm outside was terrifying. And what if there were more? The footsteps stopped. For a moment, only the storm raged. Then, the sound of drawers being opened. They were searching the kitchen. I cursed myself for leaving the lights off. The darkness, once comforting, now felt like a suffocating shroud. I had to move. Slowly, I slid off the couch, crawling towards the stairs. My phone's dim light guided me, a fragile beacon in the encroaching darkness. As I reached the stairs, the footsteps resumed, heading towards the living room. I froze, my body pressed against the cool carpet. A figure appeared in the doorway. Tall, cloaked in shadow, a flashlight beam slicing through the darkness. It scanned the room, lingering on the couch, where I had just been. Panic clawed at my throat. I held my breath, the air thick with dread. The figure moved deeper into the room, their boots brushing against the floor. I waited, my heart hammering against my ribs. Then, I crawled up the stairs, each creak of the old wood amplifying my terror. I reached the top, slipped into the first room, and locked the door. My back pressed against the cold wood, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I needed help. I opened my phone, but the signal was gone. No service. The Wi-Fi was down too. Suddenly, footsteps on the stairs. They were coming up. I scanned the room, my eyes landing on a heavy lamp. I grabbed it, the cold metal a source of grim comfort. The footsteps reached the top of the stairs, paused, then moved towards my room. A soft knock echoed through the wood. "Is someone in there?" A voice called, calm and unnervingly polite. I didn't answer. The doorknob jiggled. "Come on," the voice urged. "Let's not make this harder than it has to be." My grip on the lamp tightened. I backed away from the door, my breath held. Then, the door burst open. I swung the lamp, connecting with a grunt. The flashlight tumbled to the floor, plunging the room back into darkness. I shoved past them, fleeing down the hallway. Behind me, curses echoed, followed by the pounding of footsteps. I reached the bathroom, slamming the door shut. My chest heaved, the cold tiles a stark contrast to the fear burning within me. The doorknob rattled, then the pounding began. "You can't hide forever," the voice shouted. I searched for an escape, but the window was too small. Desperation clawed at me. Then, the pounding stopped. A chilling silence followed. I pressed my ear to the door, straining to hear any sound. Nothing. Slowly, I turned the lock, opening the door a crack. The hallway was empty. I stepped out cautiously, the weight of the lamp heavy in my hand. As I reached the top of the stairs, I saw it. The front door stood wide open, rainwater pooling on the floor. My heart sank. Had they left? Or were they luring me out? I descended the stairs, each creak of the old wood amplifying my fear. I peered out the door. The driveway was empty, the surrounding woods dark and menacing. I shut the door, the lock clicking shut with a satisfying finality. But the silence was broken by a whisper. I turned, my blood running cold. The figure stood in the middle of the room, their head tilted at an unnatural angle, a chilling smile playing on their lips. "You didn't think it would be that easy, did you?" I raised the lamp, fear giving way to a desperate need to survive. But then, their body began to contort, limbs twisting in impossible ways. The air grew cold, a guttural laugh echoing through the house. This wasn't just a burglary. This was something far worse. I stumbled backward, the lamp clattering to the floor. The figure advanced, their form a grotesque parody of humanity, casting long, dancing shadows. And then, as suddenly as it had begun, it was gone. The room was empty, the only sound the relentless drumming of the rain. I stood there, trembling, unsure of what had just happened. Was it real? Or had the fear, the isolation, driven me to the brink of madness? Even now, days later, the memory haunts me. The cold, dead eyes, the impossible contortions, the chilling laughter. I can't shake the feeling that I'm not alone, that whatever was in my house that night is still out there, watching, waiting. The floorboards groaned beneath my feet as I crept down the hallway, my heart hammering against my ribs. Rain lashed against the windows, blurring the already fading light. I clutched the baseball bat tighter, the smooth wood cold and clammy in my sweaty hands. A low growl echoed from downstairs, a sound that sent shivers down my spine. I pressed my ear against the door, straining to hear. The growling continued closer now, almost beneath the floorboards. Fear, cold and clammy, gripped me. I was alone in the house. Lisa and the kids were at a late movie, leaving me to enjoy an evening of peace and quiet. Or so I had thought. I tiptoed towards the stairs, each step sending a jolt of adrenaline through me. The growling intensified, accompanied by a sickening scraping sound. I reached the bottom of the stairs, my eyes darting around the dimly lit living room. The curtains fluttered in the wind, casting dancing shadows that seemed to writhe and coil. Then I saw it. A figure crouched by the fireplace, its back to me. It was tall and gaunt, shrouded in darkness. I couldn't make out its features, but I could feel its eyes on me, burning holes in my back. My breath hitched in my throat. I raised the bat, my grip tightening. "Who's there?" I demanded, my voice trembling. The figure didn't move. I took a hesitant step forward, the bat raised high. I said, "Who's there?" The figure turned slowly, and I gasped. It wasn't human. Its face was a grotesque mask of bone and sinew, its eyes glowing an eerie red in the dim light. Long, sharp claws extended from its hands, dripping with what looked like blood. I stumbled back, fear paralyzing me. The creature let out a guttural roar, a sound that seemed to shake the very foundations of the house. I turned and ran, my heart pounding like a drum. I scrambled up the stairs, the creature's roars echoing behind me. I reached the top of the stairs, the bedroom door looming in front of me. I fumbled with the lock, my fingers trembling. The door swung open and I stumbled inside, slamming it shut behind me. I leaned against the door, gasping for air, my eyes darting around the room, searching for a hiding place. The creature pounded on the door, its roars deafening. I backed away, my eyes falling on the window. It was open. I hesitated, the icy rain lashing against my face. But the alternative was worse. I scrambled out the window, landing with a thud on the wet grass. I ran, my bare feet pounding against the cold ground, the creature's roars fading into the distance. I ran until I reached the neighbor's house, pounding on the door frantically. The door creaked open, revealing Mrs. Gable, her face a mask of sleep. "Help!" I gasped. "There's something in my house!" Mrs. Gable's eyes widened in alarm. She ushered me inside, wrapping me in a warm blanket. "Call the police," she said, her voice trembling. "And stay here. Don't go back." I nodded, shivering, my mind reeling from the horror I had witnessed. The police arrived shortly after, sirens wailing in the night. They searched the house, but found nothing. No sign of forced entry, no sign of the creature. They chalked it up to a prank, a late-night delusion brought on by the storm. But I knew better. I knew what I had seen. I never returned to that house. I sold it, moved away, and tried to forget the horrors I had witnessed that night. But the memory of the creature, its glowing red eyes and its guttural roars, continued to haunt me, a constant reminder of the darkness that lurked just beneath the surface of our ordinary lives. I sleep with the lights on now, the slightest creak of the floorboards sending shivers down my spine. And every time the wind howls, I remember the creature, its claws raking against the door, its eyes burning with a malevolent hunger. I survived that night, but I will never truly escape the terror that still lingers in the shadows of my mind.